I stayed in a loveless marriage for my child, but who was there for me? The quiet devastation of a life built entirely for someone else is a unique kind of pain, one that only settles in when the applause dies down and you're left alone on the empty stage. I'm Julian, 42, and I made the ultimate sacrifice. I stayed in a loveless, barren marriage for over a decade, convinced I was providing the foundation my son needed. But now, looking back, the question isn't whether I saved my child, it's who was supposed to save me. Before everything turned to ice, there was fire. Clara, 41, and I started with a passionate, if tumultuous, connection. She was magnetic, demanding, and utterly captivating, a whirlwind of energy that pulled me in. I, the quiet, methodical accountant, was the calm center she seemed to need. Our early years were a confusing blend of intense highs and equally dramatic lows, but when we found out she was pregnant with Leo, everything changed. The chaos settled into a shared, profound purpose. Leo arrived, and with him, the silence. The intense passion of our early connection didn't mature into deep partnership, it simply burned out under the relentless pressure of sleepless nights and adult responsibility. We stopped connecting, first physically, then emotionally. The easy conversation disappeared, replaced by transactional discussions about bills, schedules, and baby supplies. We were excellent coworkers, highly effective at operating the small, self-contained unit that was our family. But we were no longer husband and wife. The realization that the love was dead didn't come in an explosion, it came in a slow, agonizing fade, like watching a photograph bleach in the sun. I remember standing by the crib one night when Leo was maybe 2, looking at Clara asleep in our bed, and feeling absolutely nothing, no warmth, no tenderness, only a profound sense of shared obligation. I knew then that the easy, obvious choice was to end it. We were incompatible, exhausted, and fundamentally unhappy. But then I looked at Leo. He was a bright, curious toddler, soaking up the world around him, secure in the knowledge that both his parents were always there, in the same house, sharing the same space. I grew up in a fractured home, moving between parents, feeling the seismic instability of divorce. The memory of that insecurity was a physical scar, and I swore on that little boy's sleep that I would never, ever inflict that same pain on him. That was the moment I made the choice, the commitment that would define the next decade of my life. I would stay. I would live the lie. I would be the reliable father and the present husband, even if it meant burying Julian, the man, 6 feet under the lawn of our suburban home. The decision was not based on hope that the love would return, it was based purely on necessity and duty. Leo needed a 2-parent home, and I was determined to provide it, no matter the cost to my own soul. What would you do? Choose the immediate, painful freedom of divorce, or sacrifice your happiness for the guaranteed stability of your young child? I chose the latter, and the performance began. The next 10 years were a masterclass in emotional subterfuge. Clara and I developed a meticulous script. We were the perfect, polite couple in public. Synchronized smiles, appropriate hand placements, and shared anecdotes that painted a picture of domestic bliss. We were the envy of other parents at school events and the most dependable couple at neighborhood gatherings. We even perfected the art of the "we" statement. We decided, we agreed, we planned. The truth was, we never spoke about anything that truly mattered. Clara, in particular, excelled at maintaining the facade. Her focus shifted entirely to appearances and external validation. She poured her energy into her successful real estate career, her social standing, and creating a flawless, aspirational life for Leo. She was obsessed with the right schools, the right clubs, the right family vacations, all designed to signal to the world that the Vance family was flourishing. I was the silent co-star in her meticulously directed production. I provided the financial stability, the methodical planning, and the absolute consistency she craved. My job as a senior accountant became my refuge. I embraced the numbing logic of spreadsheets and quarterly reports, finding a perverse comfort in numbers that always added up, unlike my life. Work became my second marriage, reliable and requiring only competence, not emotion. My emotional life was reduced to a small, contained box. I had no one to talk to. How could I confess to my friends that the beautiful marriage they envied was a sham? How could I tell my colleagues that I was dying inside because I was too honorable to leave? I was the rock, the pillar, and rocks don't cry. I lost my hobbies. I used to play guitar, loud and late, losing myself in the blues scale. I packed the instrument away, afraid the sound would crack the silence of our shared misery. I stopped pursuing my true interest, writing, because the words that came out were too sad, too real, too dangerous to leave lying around. I became Julian, the role, not Julian, the man. The worst part was the emotional isolation. I needed a confidant, a simple nod of understanding, but I had sealed myself off. I couldn't lean on Clara, she was the reason for the silence. I couldn't lean on friends, the confession would shatter the facade. I couldn't even lean on Leo, he was the reason for the sacrifice. I was completely, utterly alone, surrounded by the perfect, beautiful life I had purchased with my own happiness. The justification for this self-imprisonment was Leo. Every milestone, every school play, every shared bedtime story, was a checkmark in the column of necessity. He is happy, he is stable, it is worth it. Leo was my sole focus, my reason for being, the idol at the center of my personal religion of duty. I saw my suffering as an invisible shield protecting him from the cruelty of a broken home. I focused fiercely on being present. I coached his baseball team. I built him the most elaborate Lego sets. I helped him with homework, finding a simple, uncomplicated joy in his developing mind. In those moments, when his hand was in mine or his small voice was asking me a complicated question about the universe, the sacrifice felt real and noble. It felt worth the cost. But the cost was starting to be felt elsewhere. My sister, Michelle, 45, who lived a couple of states away, visited infrequently, but her keen eye noticed the exhaustion behind my smile. She didn't press, but after one visit, she called me. "Julian," she said, her voice gentle, "you look tired." Not work tired, soul tired. Are you happy? I gave her the script. Clara and I are great, Michelle. Just busy with Leo and work. Everything's stable. She paused for a long time. Stable isn't always good, brother. Sometimes stable is just stuck. Just promise me you're not sacrificing yourself for a picture. I politely ended the call shortly after, my heart pounding with the fear that she had seen the truth. As Leo moved into his pre-teen years, the performance became harder to sustain. At 12 years old, he was smart, perceptive, and acutely attuned to nonverbal cues. He was still a child, but his innocence was giving way to observation. Clara and I would argue, or rather, we would engage in sharp, cold disagreements over logistics, money, or scheduling, always ceasing abruptly the moment Leo walked into the room. We thought we were shielding him, but the effect was far worse. We were creating an atmosphere of tense, unpredictable silence. Leo started spending more time in his room, not playing, but just being quiet. He avoided the common areas. When we did things as a family, he was physically present but emotionally distant. He was sensing the massive, unaddressed iceberg beneath the surface of our polite ocean. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon. Leo was supposed to be at a friend's house, and Clara was out running errands. I was in the kitchen, finally allowing myself to slump with exhaustion, when I heard a slight noise from the living room. Leo was there. He had come home early, forgotten his book, and was waiting for the ride back. He was sitting on the stairs, watching me with a look of profound, quiet sadness that stole my breath. He didn't speak. I didn't speak, but in that moment, the illusion shattered. His eyes held no confusion. They held a deep, weary understanding. He knew the smiles were fake. He knew the tension was real. He knew his parents didn't love each other. He wasn't the happy, secure child I had sacrificed my life for. He was a lonely witness to his parents' miserable charade. I walked over to him, sat on the step below, and put my arm around his small, stiff shoulders. Leo, I started, is everything okay? He didn't look up. He just shrugged, then finally mumbled, why don't you guys talk anymore? It wasn't a child's question. It was an accusation, delivered with the heavy weight of years of observation. I had created a life of emotional stability for him, but in doing so, I had created a home devoid of emotional truth. He was craving authenticity, and I had given him a perfect lie. My entire justification, the pillar of my sacrifice, crumbled into dust. I had saved the structure but ruined the spirit within. My staying had not saved him from pain, it had simply changed the nature of his pain. That night, I didn't go to the spreadsheets. I stayed in my study, staring at the muted guitar case. The cold clarity that hid me was blinding. I had sacrificed my happiness for a false ideal, and the recipient of that sacrifice was unhappy anyway. I had nothing left. I was empty, exhausted, and now, my reason for enduring was invalidated. If you realized that the sacrifice you made to protect your child was pointless because the child saw the misery anyway, would you immediately leave, or try one final time to salvage the structure? I decided I owed myself, and Leo, the truth. The final confrontation with Clara wasn't tearful, it was clinical. I waited until Leo was safely away on a school trip. I sat Clara down at the kitchen table, the very table where we had planned years of our life like generals planning a campaign. Clara, I said, my voice steady, we need to talk about the truth. She bristled instantly, putting up the wall of polished defense. Julian, if this is about the budget for the new lawn service, we agreed on that last week. It's not about the lawn, I replied, feeling the years of silent resentment finally surface. It's about us. We haven't been married for 10 years. We've been roommates, business partners, co-parents. The love is gone. She looked genuinely surprised, as if I had suddenly started speaking Greek. The love. Julian, we are stable. We are successful. Leo is thriving. What are you talking about? Relationships aren't a movie, they're work. We do the work. I pressed on, detailing my misery, my isolation, the death of my dreams, and the immense sacrifice I had made to ensure Leo had a stable home. I told her that I had stayed for her stability, for Leo's security, at the cost of my very being. Her reaction was the most devastating moment of my life. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, and she didn't get angry. She grew cold, detached, and pragmatic. Sacrifice, she echoed, a faint, disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. Julian, no one asked you to be miserable. You chose that. You chose to stay because you knew a divorce would complicate my career and jeopardize our standing in the school community. You chose stability over drama. That wasn't a sacrifice for Leo, that was a practical choice for all of us. You're trying to make your unhappiness my fault. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. In her mind, my pain wasn't noble, it was a self-inflicted wound, a personal choice for convenience, not love. She hadn't been blind to my love, she had been blind to my self-pity. She simply viewed the loveless marriage as a successful, necessary arrangement, and my misery as an unnecessary, dramatic complication. My entire, agonizing sacrifice was dismissed as my own fault. I realized with chilling clarity that I had not been protecting a marriage or a child. I had been protecting a business arrangement and a social narrative that only existed in Clara's external reality. And no one, not Leo, and certainly not Clara, was there to catch the pieces of the man I broke to hold it all together. That was the end. I didn't need to argue anymore. I had my answer. I started the quiet, methodical process of separation. I moved out 6 weeks later, the split as tidy and emotionless as a corporate downsizing. We agreed on joint custody, dividing assets with the same chilling efficiency we used to manage our lives. The first few months in my tiny, rented apartment were terrifying. The loneliness was absolute. I was Julian, the man without a role. The husband had vanished, the stable co-parent was sharing time, and the accountant was just an employee. I sat in silence every night, looking at the muted walls, feeling the weight of 10 years of suppressed emotion finally crashing down. The irony was that I had been alone for a decade in a huge, beautiful house, but I felt the cold reality of it only now. I started therapy, a slow, painful process of excavating the man I had buried. I unpacked the guitar. The first few chords were hesitant, flat, but gradually, the music started to return, raw and mournful at first, then slowly, hesitantly, regaining its life. I started writing again, not the sad, desperate words of my youth, but simply the truth of my experience. The hardest part was realizing that my question, who was there for me, was fundamentally flawed. No one was there for me because I never allowed anyone to be. I was so busy playing the role of the silent savior that I cut myself off from every single source of support, mistaking vulnerability for weakness. The price of my noble silence was the annihilation of my own support system. Leo is adjusting. He sees us separately, and the atmosphere, while changed, is now honest. He is calmer, less watchful. He has two happy, authentic parents, even if they aren't married. The performance is over. I'm rebuilding now, brick by brick, learning to be Julian the person, messy, imperfect, and sometimes profoundly lonely, but undeniably real. The marriage failed, but the sacrifice taught me the brutal lesson. Duty to others must always be balanced by duty to self. You can't be an anchor for others if you don't have a shore to hold yourself. My sacrifice was a 10-year mistake that cost me a decade of my life. But perhaps, finally, that devastating failure has set me free to live the rest of my life story. What do you think? Did I make the right decision to finally walk away, even though it meant admitting my decade of sacrifice was a mistake? Is staying for the sake of the child ever worth the cost of losing yourself completely? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. If this story of loneliness, sacrifice, and the search for self resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to follow my journey as I try to find happiness again.